the App Borgata last show of the season here. Ken Rosenthal joining us, actually looking super rested. And Ken, how you doing? You know what I was thinking? I'm serious, Ken. You know what I was thinking? You know how we've talked to a lot of players already that have been bounced out of the playoffs, and they're like, oh, I took a week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever it is off, do nothing, and then kind of recalibrate and start my workouts and all of that. I can picture Ken being like getting home. He's been on the road for a month. Like, all right, I'm going to take a break before free agency. Ready? Like, for like 10 seconds. Okay, that was good. Ready. Okay, Let me start my calls to everybody. So is that how it goes?
Pretty much. And obviously the GM meetings are next week, so I'll be leaving for Phoenix again on Monday. I came home for a few days. But the stuff never ends, and we've got managerial openings. We've got options being picked up, some contracts being done. So there's always plenty of baseball news, whatever the time of year.
So let's do one or two on World Series, and then we'll move on to offseason storylines. Now that you're back and you got to experience all of that with the Rangers winning, what were your final thoughts? Anything that stood out in terms of conversations, interviews, observations, too, of how the Rangers got to this place?
A couple things stand out, Scott. I was with the Rangers the final weekend in Seattle. We had the Fox broadcast on Saturday, and that, of course, is the weekend when they lost the division title. Houston swept Arizona, and the Rangers lost 3 or 4 in Seattle. And I thought at the time, man, they've got to fly across the country to Tampa Bay. This team is cooked. They were anything but cooked, and they went on to this amazing run. And you look at them, and it's not a team where you'll say their rotation is totally dominant, but it was really good in October. Nathan Eovaldi, Jordan Montgomery, these guys were excellent. And they got enough from other places. And their offense, of course, is so dynamic and so good. They're a nice mix of young and old, right? With Evan Carter and Josh Young and Leody Taveras, and then some other veteran players. We know Simeon and Seager and all of those guys. So it really was a worthy champion. Now, on the other side of it, the Diamondbacks, I felt that they were just short. And you look at their middle of the order guys, it's Gabriel Moreno, who's really a kid, hitting third. Christian Walker, who didn't have a great postseason, hitting fourth. Tommy Pham, fifth in many cases. That's not a great middle of the order. Don't get me wrong. Those guys are good players. They're legitimate major league hitters, above average major league hitters. But middle of the order types for a championship team, I'm not so sure. So they've got some work to do this winter, and I expect that they'll be busy, as will all teams. And that was really it, guys. Obviously, I would have liked to have seen it gone 6 or 7 games. It didn't make it that far, but the best team won.
So you talk about the Rangers at the end of the season. Forecasting forward other years, like you were there. You were there that last week. You weren't just watching on TV. How was the demeanor of that team? And it's kind of leading into like what Bruce Bochy brings to a team. How was the demeanor of that team leaving Seattle after that series?
They seemed fine to me. And as we later learned from Bruce Bochy and others, that plane ride became kind of a galvanizing thing, the one from Seattle to Tampa Bay. They basically said to themselves, we're better than this. We can do this. New season starts the moment we start in Tropicana Field. And that's what happened. I know Bochy in particular was upset with what had happened, with the fact that they had lost the division title, lost the days off, lost the opportunity to start at home. But it sure worked out well for them. So you look back, and guys, you know this, Erik, Todd, you never know what galvanizes a club. You never know what brings a club together. That seemed to have that effect on them, and clearly it was a positive effect.
Well, moving forward, the other day, or yesterday actually, the Players' Choice Awards voted by the players. We had a discussion up here a little bit ago about who should have been the most outstanding player. I'm not going to say who was swaying which way. I would just ask you, in your humble opinion, if you're allowed to, who you thought between, Ronald Acuna and Shohei Ohtani, who you think would get that award this year?
Well, have they announced that yet, the Players' Choice?
Yep.
Right here on FT.
It's Acuna, right? Yeah,
last night
Acuna.
Acuna won over Ohtani.
Right.
And Ken, we talked about that over the past week. It's a cool award to have one player win overall. And obviously the players are going to vote differently from, say, the writers if they were doing it. So, curious on your perspective how you compare those two.
It's difficult because Ohtani, his season ended, in early September, and he really didn't pitch much the last 2 months. But I would still go with Ohtani, as great as Acuna was, and he was great. to me, what Acuna does is standard baseball stuff. I mean, standard as far as he's a one-position type. Where Ohtani is, of course, this two-way marvel, and it's really hard to compare in any way. Now, that's not to take anything away from Ronald Acuna Jr.'s season. It was a historic season, a brilliant season in so many ways. But to me, the way we were talking about Ohtani really for the first 4 months, this was otherworldly. And I don't know that we should forget that just because he got hurt.
Thank you. Have you ever seen a peacock on stage at Borgata? I feel like I can peacock around now.
Erik just got so much taller. It's crazy.
Ken, you build me
up.
I
will say this, guys. It's kind of an apples and oranges debate, right? They're two totally different players. And no one is wrong for saying Acuna because he went 1 to 162, played almost every day the entire season, and contributed in a huge way. But it just seems to me that Ohtani's contributions are so unique, not just for the present, but in the game's history. I know he got hurt, and that does affect things, but he's going to win the American League MVP despite getting hurt. So to me, he should win this award, too. I would say the same thing.
Thank you, Ken. I always like finding people that agree with me, and those are the people I want to hang around. I don't want to hang around people that don't agree with me. So, and you're wrong. Actually,
great debate.
You're wrong.
Great debate.
There's no way anybody should choose Acuna. But anyway, we'll go on to the next thing.
Well, let's get to some off-season topics. So I'm going to actually split it up this way so that you can go kind of wherever you want to go. Thoughts on the National League West first. So, we get a couple bits of news over the past 48 hours with the Dodgers, right? Muncy signs the extension, so now it's 2 years, $24 million. That'll take him at least through 2025. They have a club option on him for 2026. They've been keeping him around for a while. Lance Lynn, his $18 million option was declined, so he just gets a $1 million buyout, and that's your colleague at The Athletic, Fabian Argia, who just reported that today. And then just wanted to mix in also the recent work. I know you were a part of the article with Evan Drellick and Dennis Lin about the Padres taking out that $50 million loan. So when you look at the state of the NL West right now, and we covered the Diamondbacks a little bit, what are your thoughts heading into the offseason?
It's going to be an interesting offseason for a lot of reasons. One, let's start with the Padres. Even before we published that article the other day, we had heard a lot of talk about their need to cut payroll, to get down to about $200 million. They were at about 250, 260, I believe, this year. So Soto, to me, is a goner. And they're going to have to do some things along similar lines to get that payroll down to where they want it. The Dodgers, I still believe, are the favorites for Ohtani. And beyond that, I actually believe they need Ohtani. And you can say, Ken, every team needs Ohtani. That's a ridiculous statement. But the Dodgers are in a place where they've won all these division titles. They've had all these postseason appearances. Yet the only World Series they won was in the shortened 2020 season. And it seems to me that a portion of the fan base, I don't know what percentage, is kind of bored and kind of needs some sizzle. And listen, I know Ohtani can't pitch next season and their biggest need is starting pitching. Guess what? You can sign Ohtani and you can sign 2 starting pitchers too, and then you'll have Ohtani to pitch hopefully when he returns from his second Tommy John surgery. So I still see them as being a force in the division and a force for Ohtani. Then there are the Giants. And we're not even talking about the Diamondbacks right now, but the Giants are an interesting team too because they need to do some things. They're bringing in Bob Melvin. Farhan Zaidi just got a contract extension as well, 3 years, but it is clear that he needs to start taking this team to another level now. And there's a lot of frustration there, a lot of frustration among their fans. They've struck out on big players for quite some time now. I don't know if they can necessarily address that this offseason. Maybe they get Ohtani. But the Giants have some pressure on them. And then the Diamondbacks, probably not as financially as much of a force as the Dodgers, certainly, and the Giants, but they are coming off a World Series appearance. They can do some things, and Matt Chapman is a guy who would fit them perfectly. So really, Scott, I'm glad you identified this division because it's one of the most interesting divisions we have going into the offseason.
Okay, because you can't choose the Rockies because their ownership doesn't care about doing anything but finishing 500. Who has the most pressure on them? Not a person. Which organization has the most pressure really in the next 5 days to formulate their plan to say, hey, free agency, new manager, all that stuff going on. Which team has the most pressure?
Well, I would say the Giants because they haven't won in recent times. The Dodgers are there every year. The Padres were in the NLCS just 2 years ago. But the Giants are in a funny place. They kind of have a disaffected or disenchanted fan base right now. And part of that was Kapler and the way they run the team and the matchup-oriented style that they had. But they need to kind of get back to a point where they're interesting again. They were not a fun team to watch, right? They were just kind of constantly platooning, doing some other things, pitching. That was kind of a mishmash too. So I would say them. The Dodgers don't have much pressure on them per se. They're going to be really good. The Padres, yes, there's pressure, but they're cutting payroll most likely, and they'll have a good team next year. It just seems to me the Giants are kind of the odd man out right now. If you go back the past several years, actually the past 2 years, because in 21 they were really good. That's what I would say, the Giants.
Very good. Yeah, you saw what happened this year. There was one of those teams where they had a really good shot of making it, and next thing you know, they just fizzled at the end, and that's baseball. I just want to switch over just a little bit to the coaching standpoint now, managerial parts. Craig Counsell, there's been a lot of talks about him, talking with the Mets. People are trying to wait for those pieces to fall down. Once he signs, it seems like then other things will go forward. From what I've been hearing, he's waiting to hear back maybe from the Mets and decide what he wants to do. I heard whatever they want to give him or whomever wants to give him something, he's going to go back to the Brewers and say, hey, can you meet that? Because I feel like he still wants to be the Brewers manager. Anything from that point?
I would agree that that's the way it's going to go, Todd, that he will give the Brewers a chance to, if not match, come close to whatever offer he might get from another club, be it the Mets, the Guardians, any other team that might be interested. And we'll see his true intentions. It's kind of like in free agency and even during the season. You don't know what is really going on until you see the outcome. And once we have an outcome, then we'll know, was he really willing to leave Milwaukee for the New York Mets or some other team? Or did he want to stay in Milwaukee all along, and did he take less money to stay with the Brewers? Or did the Brewers step up and give him comparable money to what he was getting offered somewhere else? So I'm not sure how this is going to play out. No one is, except maybe Craig Counsell. And perhaps he doesn't even know because he doesn't have maybe all the information, the offers in hand just yet. If I had to bet, I'd still bet Milwaukee, but I don't know. And I just find it a little curious. Curious is not the right word. I would be a little bit surprised if he was willing to go to New York. That's all.
I would agree with you. The interactions that I've had with him, I would agree. But which job is a better job? Winning in a place that has never won a championship, or going to the pressure cooker that is New York, that is starving for a championship, clearly. And if the Mets can get a championship before the Yankees do, it would be tides would turn in the city of New York. But which is the better job? If you're just don't even take Craig Counsell and what he's done, which job is the better job?
I would say the Mets just because of the resources. And there are people, Erik, who would disagree with me because Milwaukee has been more successful in recent years. But the Mets are in this position now where they've really improved the farm system with the Verlander and Scherzer trades and some drafts and some other things. They're kind of going forward with this transition. And if they succeed with it, and I see no reason why they shouldn't, obviously if they pick the wrong prospects, it would be a problem, but they've got highly regarded guys, then maybe not next year, but maybe by 25, 26, 27, they are a force again because they've got balance in their payroll, they've got the ability to spend, they've got all kinds of advantages that the Milwaukee Brewers will never have. Now, the Brewers are an efficient operation. They've done great, but let's look at their big picture. Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, coming up on free agency, Willy Adames the same. Their system is okay. It's not amazing. They've got Jackson Chourio, of course, and some others. So I would be worried about Milwaukee's future because the strength of that team is the starting pitching, and it's not going to be a strength necessarily much longer.
Hey, Ken, question for you, continuing on the manager conversation. How do you think guys like Joe Madden and Buck Showalter will be received. I know they're still trying to manage in this game, right? And I know at least I think Buck's been involved in an interview or two, and we had Joe Madden on about a week and a half ago, and he was like gung ho. I want to manage again in the right situation, but I want to do things. He didn't say my way, but he doesn't want to do things someone else's way completely. I'm just wondering, where we are on the scale of that. I felt like we got like really, really tilted towards you better be lockstep with your front office and really kind of listen to your front office. If for 95% of managers, Bruce Bochy definitely helps that cause when he comes back after sitting out for 3 years, and it's not just him, but takes a team to a World Series title. Does that help guys like Buck and Joe come in and say, listen, guys, you have to also trust me and give me some autonomy to do what I want to do here?
Each situation is different. I'll start off by saying that the last 3 managers have all been older, quote, old school guys. Snitker, Baker, and Bruce Bochy. Those are the last 3 to win a World Series. That's what I should have said. Does that mean then there'll be a run on older, old school type managers? Maybe, but when I said everything is different, or every situation is different, Bruce Bochy's personality is a lot different than Joe Madden's, a lot different than Buck Showalter's. Those 2 guys, fairly or not, Madden and Showalter, have been perceived to be, in their own ways, individuals. That they are mavericks in a sense. Certainly Madden is seen that way. And Buck, of course, does his thing, and it's not for everyone. He can be a guy that kind of gets involved in other things in the organization. He's gotten better about it, in my opinion, but there's still some of that there, and there's still some GMs who are not going to want to work with Buck Showalter when they can get a more pliant individual in that job. So that, to me, is the bigger issue. Is someone going to be willing to take on a Buck Showalter and a Joe Madden and all the good that they bring, and there's so much good with both, but as well the entire portrait, the entire package. We'll see. The Angels' job is open. Buck Showalter has ties with Perry Minasian, and that could be a possibility. Joe Madden, I'm not sure. What if Jim Crane wants a big name to replace Dusty Baker? Joe Madden's one of the biggest names. So I can see scenarios where each of these guys gets a job, and I certainly can see where they don't.
You brought up a good point there. GM doesn't want to work with that. Ego is what I heard. You didn't say ego. I said ego.
It's not ego. It's their own guy. They're their own guys, and they have their ways, Erik, and they do their thing. And Buck is a very distinct person. Joe Madden's a very distinct person. Ego is part of it. It's part of it with everyone in this industry. That's, of course, a given. But it's more that they're individual styles that are not for everyone. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Yeah. And so that made my brain think, okay, how many more Chris Youngs are we going to see? We got a Craig Breslo in Boston. Ex-players, whether you think they were elite players or not is irrelevant. They're ex-players. And look what they did. They won what John Daniels wasn't able to win.
Right. And that I can see happening, a run on ex-players. Now, yes, Breslo is the first, the first behind Chris Young.
Right.
There is something to being a player in that position if you have the ability to do that job. That, to me, is an advantage. Because that GM, as opposed to a lot of the GMs today, don't have the same... Well, that GM will have the feel that a lot of the GMs today don't have. And I've talked a lot about feel on the show before, and I think we all value that in people. We want to see people who have a good feel for players, a good feel for the game, a good understanding of the way going forward a team should be. Sometimes with some of the GMs, that gets lost. And to me, it's a huge advantage for Chris Young to Craig Breslo to have been there, to have, to use the baseball term, have dirt in their spikes. It matters. And it's not that you can't be a GM without playing experience or major league playing experience. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying that for the right people, if you have the right set of characteristics and the right combination of skills, if you also have the playing background, it, to me, is an edge.
So I want to go to we talk about GMs and the meetings now that they have. So I always have guys ask me, friends, fans, hey, man, during the time, what happens during these GM meetings? And I'm like, I give them an inkling here of like, I don't know exactly what happens. I know they talk and chat about things, but can you give us an inkling and let some friends, family, and Maybe Scott understand it. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I've never been.
Oh,
I've
never
actually, and I've heard that there's more FaceTime nowadays at those, Ken, with some of the execs because it's less crazy than there is at the winter meetings.
Well, there's no doubt about that, Scott. The winter meetings, you never see the GMs. They're holed up in their suites with their people, and we only see them if they come to the podium to announce a signing, and that's pretty rare in itself. So the GM meetings, yes, there's more FaceTime, there's fewer media. It's kind of a smaller gathering in general. Now, what they are designed to do is get the GMs together, and they will meet with MLB and others. They'll have these individual meetings in which they discuss their various issues of the game. For my purposes and from the media standpoint, fan interest, what the GM meetings often are a foundation for other moves to come. And the GMs talk informally, they meet, they talk with each other, they hit each other in the lobby or whatever the case might be, and they start exchanging ideas and start getting the balls in motion on certain things that they want to do. Agents are there too, and they will, of course, meet with teams and do their preliminary work. So really, it's a foundational kind of thing. Often you'll hear at the winter meetings when a deal is announced, or even after, hey, we started talking at the GM meetings, we threw some stuff around, and then we picked it back up. That's what basically the GM meetings are.
So I have a question for you when you're at the GM meetings. I mean, you don't have to ask this directly, but maybe you do to any of the Yankees execs. I'm confused about the whole process of hiring basically a consulting or analytics firm or whatever it is to analyze what you're doing there. To me, and Yankee fans that are fans of FT have been dying to get back involved in the mix of what they're going to do in the offseason. But it starts with this story that has just come out. Obviously, I might get the name wrong. Brendan Cuddy. Okay, so he puts the story out about that firm and how they're going to look at the way that they're doing things. So I think there's a lot of Yankee fans that have the narrative of they're overdoing it on the analytics side. And also they're like, isn't this the epitome of that? You're having a group that's coming in who doesn't specialize in baseball to tell you what you think you should be doing in baseball. I haven't heard of this or seen this in any other franchise in my time covering the sport.
The Astros did it. The Astros did it several years ago with McKinsey, yes. And a number of teams, I believe, have done similar things. And basically what it is a business asking an outside consulting firm to review their operations. That's what this is. Now, if you're a Yankee fan, what you're worried about is meaningful change coming out of this. I don't know if meaningful change is going to come out of it. And I don't know that you need a consulting firm to determine what is wrong here. A lot of fans and a lot of media seem to have a pretty good idea of what's wrong. And I don't know that this firm is going to have that same kind of input. They may talk about processes with how the team makes decisions. I don't exactly know what a consulting firm does. I don't know that a consulting firm is going to say, you know what, too much analytics. That's not what they're coming in for. So we keep hearing about these Yankees changes. Oh, big changes coming with the Yankees. They're going to do things differently. Haven't seen it. Off-season is about to begin. So I don't know what they're talking about. Clearly, it doesn't seem that they're talking about Brian Cashman or Aaron Boone. Maybe it's a farm director. Maybe they overhaul their player development somehow. I'm not sure. But so far, it's just all talk, and we have not seen anything of substance.
Ken, do you think it's something where at the end of the year they come back and say, we went through all these numbers, we did this. Like, is it just player driven, or can it be for brass? Like, why don't they come back and say, hey, listen, this guy's not worth it anymore. You need to fire this guy and get rid of. No,
I don't think it's players. I would be surprised, Todd, if that's what they're talking about. I mean, these are not baseball people. These are people who evaluate companies and the way the company is run. So it's not like they're going to come in and say, you know what, you got to get rid of LeMahieu. He's not the player you thought he was. It's not that at all. It's more, how does the farm department run? How does the scouting department run? I mean, this is my assumption. I can't imagine they're going to take an outside firm's advice on which players to pursue and which players to keep, etc. That's not what this is.
What if they say, hey, you need a new leader of your front office? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I mean, they don't have to follow that advice, the Yankees, or they can look at it and say maybe they do need a new leader. I would be surprised if that was their conclusion, because if you just look at the way the Yankees run, I don't know that you can say they're run poorly as far as their organization itself. I'm not talking about trades. I'm not talking about how they've put together the teams. I'm talking about the way the organization runs. Maybe it is run poorly by Cashman. I don't know, but That doesn't seem to me to be the issue. It seems to me the issue is evaluation. They've not evaluated their own players well. They've not evaluated outside players well that they've brought in. And that's what needs to really be fixed at the major league level. There may be other things underneath the hood that this consulting firm will identify and make suggestions on. I just don't know.
And the problem is I think they're going a little outside the box, a little too much, trying to figure things out. Hey, let's try a firm. Let's do this analytical process. Let's bring in this guy. I mean, at the end of the year, if you don't win, there's a problem. And so, if you can't figure out what that problem is going from last year's work, then we got another problem.
I don't disagree with that. And obviously, I've never run a business, so I don't really know how this works necessarily. It doesn't seem unreasonable to me that a big-time organization like the Yankees or U.S. Steel or Panasonic, any company you might want to name, it's not unreasonable that they would want an outside look. I get that. But what is the meaningful change that's going to come about? That's the question, and we don't have the answers yet.
It's funny, like whatever happens in 2024, everyone's either going to look at it and be like, that was brilliant, or they're going to be like, oh, that was terrible, it didn't work. So
I would say real quick that just that we gave the White Sox a really hard time about not going anywhere except for in their organization. So kudos to the Yankees for going outside. Whether or not it's good information or not, we can't tell. They don't even know. They have to evaluate it, but they're willing to ask the questions. So to me, I think that's a big. It's a big step.
Hire me though. I could be like, hey, you should have signed Bryce Harper.
You don't have the backing that this company has.
I understand that. I'm just saying some of it sometimes to me is just simple. Like, hey, mid-20s free agents, you should be in play for them.
I would agree
Bryce,
with Scott.
Corey.
Yes.
There were so many times, Ken, over the last 5 years back when I was at MLB, where I thought they were going to be involved on those types of players, and they weren't. They weren't even in the discussions for them, which I was shocked about. And I think that's probably the biggest regret. Sure, these are different kind of evaluations, but that's where the mistake is. So anyway,
I would agree, Scott. That sums it up well, in my opinion.
Yeah,
they got Rodon. They got Cole.
I know, but and Cole was great. I get it. We got to jump, and obviously Ken's got a lot to do too. So Ken, we appreciate you. Congratulations on an awesome playoffs and playoff coverage over at Fox. Always enjoy doing it, including the interviews in the dugout and all of that. So thank you for everything you do, and we'll see you on Fair Territory next week.
Thanks a lot, Scott. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you.